Last July, we spent a week down in Daytona Beach, Florida with extended family. And on one particular afternoon about midweek, Tammy, my wife, and I, we grew a bit weary of the beach and the pool. And so we were talking with each other, and I said, man, how great would it be if we could just go to lunch together today, just you and I and no kids. So we get in the elevator and head upstairs to the condo, and I was talking to my sister, and I said, sis, could you watch the kids for just like an hour or so while we go grab lunch? And she said, sure. Now the kicker is my sister and her husband Graham and their family, they live in Florida, so they had a car there and we didn't. So I said, sis, could we also borrow your car to go get lunch together? She said, sure, not a problem, and hands me her car keys. We get back in the elevator and go down to the parking garage. We get in their car. And we were feeling all cool and native Floridian-like because we had the sunroof open and they're surfers. They had a couple of surfboards on this trip. One of the surfboards was on the roof of the car. And so we're driving out of the parking lot, the parking garage. I make a right. Then I make another right onto A1A. And as I started to pick up speed, I noticed in the corner of my eye through the sunroof that the surfboard that I thought was strapped to the roof, it wasn't strapped to the roof. And it's sticking up in the air. And then I noticed through my rear view mirror that the surfboard is bouncing in the street behind me, which wouldn't have been an altogether bad thing, but there was a pickup truck behind me. And the pickup truck ran over this surfboard. I pulled over, he kept going, and there was two gentlemen on the street corner. They ran out and started picking up the pieces of this surfboard, and y'all, it wasn't like completely in half, but it looked like a shark had gotten a hold of it a few different times. There was big gashes and gouges and bites out of it. And so we take the thing, we stick it in the back of the car, and I thought, man, this is awful. I've got to call sis. So I call sis. Sis, you are not going to believe what happened. You had a surfboard on the roof of your car, and it wasn't strapped on, and that surfboard blew off the car, and it bounced on the street, and then it got ran over by a pickup truck, and it doesn't look good. She said her first words, oh my goodness, please tell me it's not the blue one. Yeah, it's the blue one. And she said, oh my goodness, Ryan, that is Graham's favorite board. He just got that board, and it's by far the most expensive one. All right, we're coming back to the parking garage. Meet us down there. So we get into the parking garage, and she sees it. She says, oh my goodness, it's awful. I said, I know, let's just not tell Graham this happened. She says, how are we going to get out of it? So I was the person designated to go upstairs into the condo and talk to Graham and just be honest with him. So I get up to the condo, I take Graham out to the balcony. I said, dude, I am so sorry. I borrowed your car and there was a surfboard on top and it wasn't strapped on and the thing blew off and it started bouncing down the street and then it got run over by a truck and it just doesn't look good. And he said, it wasn't the blue one, was it? I said, yeah, it was the blue one. And I said, man, I'm so sorry. If it can be repaired at all, I don't think it's possible, but if it can, we'll cover the cost. Or if we've got to get you a new board, we'll somehow figure it out. And man, I knew he was going to lay into me. I knew it. He said, don't worry about it. It's just a surfboard. No, dude, this was like your favorite board. You just got this board. It's the most expensive one. Don't worry about it. It's just a surfboard. But you still have that little guilt inside because you know it was kind of your fault. You were driving. Don't worry about it. It's just a surfboard. Now, to be honest with y'all, I had forgotten about that surfboard for the most part until this Wednesday afternoon, the day before Thanksgiving. My sister texted me a photo, and it was a photo of a renewed blue surfboard, the same one that blew off of the car and into the street and got run over by a pickup truck. And see, this surfboard, it went through a bit of a rebirthing experience. It was given new life. And what I love about the new life is if you look closely, you can see some of the blemishes in the surfboard. But see, my sister texted me and she said, like new. They took it to their local surfboard shop, and the owner there, he said, dude, this is perfect because I just got a new apprentice and I'm teaching him the way of doing surfboard repair, and this is a great project for him. I don't know how long it's going to take him, but no cost to you. Grace is the thing that allows us to see everything new again. But see, it isn't just about surfboards, is it? Because we're always talking about actual people. And I don't know about y'all, but have you noticed that there are people in life who have been through some things and they are filled with things, they become more exhausted, more weary, more bitter, and more cynical. And then there are people in life who have been through some things, but they become more filled with grace. They become more filled with awe and wonder. They find more joy in the simple things. They become more alive, more aware, more awake. And see, what I've noticed about these people is they all have something in common. They have all experienced the process of rebirth. And so this morning, for the next few minutes, I just want to pose the question with you: how do we become these kinds of people? The kind of people who experience rebirth, where everything is new again. So I want to look at a story with you this morning. This is by far one of my favorite stories in Scripture. It comes from John's Gospel, chapter 3. It's a story about Jesus and a man named Nicodemus. It's a story about rebirth. Just the first 10 verses goes like this. There was a Pharisee named Nicodemus, a Jewish leader. He came to Jesus at night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God, for no one could do these miraculous signs that you do unless God is with him. And Jesus answered, I assure you, unless someone is born anew, it's not possible to see God's kingdom. And let's just pause there for just a moment. That word that you saw, anew, it can be translated a number of different ways, but in the Greek, it's this word anothen. And anothen can be translated, like I said, a number of different ways. It depends on which Bible translation you're reading. You'll see it different ways. It can be translated as anew, to be born from anew. It can be translated as from above, to be born from above. It can also be translated as this word again, to be born again. And I get it. For some of you, when you hear that phrase born again, to be a born-again Christian or a born-again Jesus follower, well, it carries a bit of religious baggage, doesn't it? Because when you hear that phrase, you're thinking, yeah, I know about those born-again Christians. I mean, they're the most judgmental people. They're the most exclusive people. I mean, for some of you, not all of you, but some of you, when you hear the phrase born-again Christian, the thing that comes to mind is the guy standing on the corner of the street with a bullhorn, yelling at everyone and telling them that if they're not like him and believe like him and repent, then God's going to send them all to hell. But see, when Jesus was talking about being born anew or being born again, Jesus always talked about it in the sense of seeing things, everything in a new way. It was always about new life right here and right now. So for the next few minutes, maybe we can recapture together, reimagine together what it means to be born again. Now, a brief word about Nicodemus, because Nicodemus was a very powerful, influential Jewish leader. He was a leader among this group called the Pharisees. And we don't have time to go into all the history of the Pharisees, but it's enough to say for purposes here that if you read through the Gospels, Jesus was absolutely relentless in his critique towards the Pharisees. Because for Jesus, the Pharisees were people who knew. They had some information, they had knowledge, but they hadn't seen. They couldn't see. And isn't it interesting? I mean, these people knew things. They knew the Torah. They knew the law. They could recite it backwards and forwards, but they couldn't see. In the text, When does Nicodemus come to Jesus? At night. It's the number one metaphor used in John's gospel. The contrasting metaphor of night, darkness, and light, new life. Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night. Therefore, Nicodemus can't see what God is up to. And Jesus says to him, man, you want to see what's happening here? You want to see what God is up to in the world? You want to see a whole nother world bursting forth right here within this one? Well, Nicodemus, you can't see it unless you go through a rebirth until you're born again. Jesus uses the most beautiful metaphor, the most beautiful image for new life, and Nicodemus doesn't get it. He's a bit slow on the uptake. Verse 4, Nicodemus asked, how is it possible for an adult to be born? It's impossible to enter the mother's womb for a second time and be born, isn't it? And Jesus answered, I assure you, unless someone is born of water and the Spirit, it's not possible to enter God's kingdom. Whatever is born of the flesh is flesh, and whatever is born of the Spirit is spirit. Now, don't be surprised that I said to you, you must be born anew, or again. God's Spirit blows wherever it wishes. You hear its sound, but you don't know where it comes from or where it is going. It's the same with everyone who is born of the Spirit. And Nicodemus said, how are these things possible? And Jesus answered, what? You are a teacher of Israel, and you don't know these things. Side note. I became so refascinated with this story some months ago when Tammy was pregnant with our new baby boy. And I got out the scriptures and I was reading this story to her and I said, honey, isn't this story is beautiful? And we knew it was a boy at this time and we were going through some baby names. And I read the story and I said, this is like an image of new life, and Nicodemus is coming at night and it's unexpected life. And how would it be to name our baby boy Nico after Nicodemus? To which she said, no, we're not doing that. So we got Brixton River out of the deal. Now, to be born anew or to be born again is about seeing. And for Jesus, new life is always about seeing everything in a new way. It's the moments when you begin to see things you hadn't seen before. It's the moments where your world actually becomes bigger. Something within you expands. You see what's most important. Have you experienced this? Have you experienced rebirth? When I was a campus minister at the University of Denver, right before I came here to St. Luke's, I received an email from one of my students. It was a Thursday afternoon, and it was a really simple email. She said, I know I haven't been around lately, but I'm coming tonight, and I have some good news to share with you. And see, I know it was a Thursday afternoon because on Thursday evenings was our big gathering. We gathered every Thursday evening at 7:02 p.m. And for 5 years straight, we made 250 sack lunches, peanut butter and jelly sack lunches. We called it PB&J night. And we would make these lunches, 50 or so college students, and then we would take some of them down to El Centro Humanitario, where we served lunches to some of the day laborers and hung out with them and built relationships with them and prayed with them. And then we would take lunches down to the Civic Center Park and hang out with some of the homeless folks there and serve communion and serve lunch and build relationships with them and pray with them. And anyway, this student, she came a few minutes early on that Thursday night. And she said, Ryan, it's just been awful, man. My life just went so dark. And I hated myself. I wanted to die. And then she pulls up her sleeves. And you could see these scars all up and down her arms. No open wounds, just scars. And she said, today marks 6 months since I've cut myself. And I've gotten help, and I'm still getting help. And it's amazing because relationships in my life are getting better. And I never had a good relationship with my parents, but we actually have a relationship now, and we're working on things. And I actually have a relationship with God, and I'm growing that relationship, and it's just been amazing. And she said, it feels like everything is new again. And then she says to me, should I share this with the group tonight? Because see, on many of those Thursday nights, we would have this kind of impromptu joys and concerns time where we would together lift up our joys and the burdens that we're carrying, and we lift them up and give them to God. And I said, yeah, if you're ready, I think this is a good idea. People have been asking about you, because she was very active in the campus ministry and then just went dark on us. If you're ready, I think it's a good idea. So later on that night, 50 or so students in this room making peanut butter and jelly sack lunches. She comes to the front of the room and she stands on a chair. And she's got a shaky voice. And she says, hi, everyone. I know a lot of you have been worried about me, and you've been concerned, and you've been asking where I've been. And I just want you to know life was awful. I hated myself and I wanted to die. And for the second time that evening, she lifts up her sleeves. She said, I also want you to know today is 6 months since I've cut myself or engaged in any self-harm. And y'all, when she said it, you could hear a pin drop. Absolute silence. No ruffling of bags, no moving around of peanut butter and jelly. And it was silent for one moment. And then it was like being at Game 7 of the World Series with a walk-off home run. I mean, that room of college students just exploded in applause and cheering. And this young lady got hugs and high fives, and talk about being tossed about in the wind and bouncing down the street and getting run over and damaged, and now standing with all her scars but beaming with light and new life. Talk about rebirth. And Jesus in verse 7 and 8 says to Nicodemus, man, Nicodemus, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised that I tell you you have to be born anew or born again. Because God's Spirit blows wherever it wishes, and you don't always know where it's coming from or where it's going. That's the way this new life stuff works. In other words, there is a great mystery at the heart of every human being. Something deeply mysterious happens when you experience rebirth, new life. And you might not always have the language for the new thing God is doing, because the truth is, my friends, grace is sometimes beyond words, isn't it? And Jesus is shifting the conversation from knowing, from just information, to seeing everything in a new way. Nicodemus, you know some things, but you haven't yet seen. How do we become the kinds of people who experience rebirth, where everything is new again? Well, we open ourselves to God, even when we don't have all the answers. We cry out to God, God, here's my life. Help me see, because right now I just can't see. Help me see. Or we say, God, it feels like the same old every single day. And sometimes we wonder if you're even existent, if you're even present in the world, if you even care about things. Or we say, you know what, God, things have gotten really dark in my life recently. Yeah. Keep coming to God with all your wonderings and all the darkness. And think about how different the story could have been. Nicodemus came to Jesus at night, but Jesus wasn't there. Aren't you glad God is present in the darkness? And see, here's the thing about rebirth. The greatest experiences of rebirth tend to happen, not always, but they tend to happen in your deepest, darkest moments. The times in your life where it feels like you're barely hanging on in the darkness and you don't know what's going to come at you next. And some of you are there right now in those dark places. And if I can leave you with a word of encouragement, keep going. The rebirthing process can be long. It can feel drawn out. It can be painful. It's not easy, but there is the potential to see everything new again. And this is the story of Advent. It's the story that comes to us again and again and again in the waiting, in the uncertainty, in the anticipation. And I don't know about y'all, but I can so easily and so frequently lose sight. I need the story of Christ coming into the world again and again and again. I need to be born again and again and again so that I can see everything new again and again and again. Amen.